So here's some tasks that we have to meet within this field. We have to maintain confidentiality. There are 3 reasons to break confidentiality. Some people break this up into 4. I tend to put it into 3. One is if the client provides information that gives us the ability to break confidentiality, in which case they have to sign a release of information, or you'll hear that referred to as an ROI. So they have to do that first. Then we will share only what they give us permission to share and only with whom. Okay, so that's one way to break confidentiality. Second is if we are subpoenaed by court. Now, each state's going to have a different way of viewing this one, because there are some states that you can actually refuse to release your notes. State of Texas is not one of those. So if we are subpoenaed for court, then we have to release our notes. Again, another reason to make sure that your writing is top notch. The third reason that we have to break confidentiality is if we find out that either the client is harming themselves or going to harm somebody else, suicide or homicide, or we find out that a minor is being harmed. The minor could be the client. The minor could be somebody else within the house. So we have to break confidentiality for that. Now, one thing you have to understand is if there is a minor being harmed, you have 48 hours to report to CPS. This is where people tend to make a mistake. If you find out a minor has been harmed 5 years ago, but CPS was reported, it doesn't matter. You still are required to report to CPS. A lot of times our clients will come in and say, yeah, I was molested as a child, and they're still a minor. They're 15-year-old. Yeah, I was molested whenever I was 4 and 5, and CPS came in and they did an investigation and all. CPS may or may not have come in and done an investigation. Our clients will sometimes tell us that because they're scared of CPS. What I always tell my clients is if I have to contact CPS, I'm going to let them know you are working with me so that way it's a smoother process for you because you're already ahead of the game. You're getting counseling. So that's how I tend to handle CPS. But if they're 14 and they were molested at age 4 or 5, you still report at age 14. And you make the report stating that they voiced that they were molested at age 4 and 5 and that CPS had investigated. Then CPS does what they do. But we have to understand we are the life gate. We are the people who can help a child get out of a dangerous situation. Or we don't listen and the child stays in a dangerous situation. So confidentiality has a lot of little pieces to it. It's very important that you understand that concept. Your goal is to encourage clients to fully express their feelings, issues, and develop insight into their own lives. Not for you to tell them what they need to know. This is not advice giving. This is to help them develop their insight into their own lives. Because if you give them advice, guess what? You have a client for life, and you have now taught them to be dependent on you. That is not a positive thing. That is actually unethical. So you want to help them develop the insight into their own lives so that way they don't have to continue coming to you for the same thing. They can start learning to live life on their own. And then your goal is to collect data. This data can be done through interviews. It's observation. It's through test assessments and measures. We are allowed to do some tests and assessments and measures. Again, if it's at a certain level that you have not been trained at, then you have to pass that on to a psychologist. Now, you'll learn that more in your assessments course, and so I'm not going to belabor that topic any more than what I need to. Okay, so additional tasks. You may be assessing for suicidal and homicidal ideation. There's a level 1, level 2, level 3. We'll put it like that. Level 1 is there's a plan, but there's no means, there's no timeline. Or there's a means, but there's no plan and there's no timeline. Or there's a timeline, but there's no means and no plan. In other words, you have one of the three. Level 2, you have two of those three. Maybe they have the means, maybe they have the timeline, but they really haven't thought of the plan yet. Or you have level 3, which is the high priority. Those are the ones that have all three. Depending on your client and where they fall in that depends on your next steps. It may be referring to inpatient. It may be doing a mandatory inpatient. It could be requesting that the client see you 2 or 3 times a week. Now, if they're on insurance, that may be more difficult. Insurance will usually cover 2 times a week, but not anything more. If they're not on insurance, you have a little bit more leeway on that part. Same thing with homicidal ideation. Same plan, means, timeline. Now, homicidal ideation, you would be notifying the police of that. So if they are on a high level, you would keep them in your office and you would notify the police and you would work with them through that process. You don't drop your clients. That's client abandonment. You work with them through these processes. So if I'm putting a client inpatient, I let them know while you're inpatient, you're going to be working with a therapist there, a psychiatrist there, a psychologist there, and you're going to be receiving group therapy. When you get ready to be discharged, you're going to call me and we will resume where inpatient left off. You're going to want to complete notes on time. If you are doing telehealth, sometimes this is a little bit easier to do on time because you can take notes while you're talking with your client. And some people will take notes face-to-face while talking with their client. It's a personal choice. That's a learning skill. Make sure if you're taking notes while your client is talking that you're able to still stay connected with what your client is saying and you're not getting lost in the notes instead of focusing on your client. But at the very, very least or most, you want to make sure your notes are completed within 24 hours of the appointment. The reason for this is when you get to 1 or 2 clients, okay, that day or 48 hours, 72 hours later, you're probably still okay. You probably still remember quite a few things. When you get up to 10, 15, 20, 30 clients a week, you're going to get clients confused. It's just a lot of information our brain has to process through. The other reason for completing notes on time, and I actually recommend getting them done right after the session or right before you leave for the day, is that it's a good way to debrief what all you've taken in that day. So I use it as part of my debriefing. And so I write my notes very much how I would write a journal entry. And that is my debriefing. You may be asked to complete FMLA, short-term disability, SSI, or other appropriate documents. Now, this can depend on your licensure level. Also, whether or not you have a doctorate. I have a client right now that I might be asked to complete some FMLA documents for. But as I've told them, if your insurance company requires a medical doctor, then you would want to use this medical doctor. I wouldn't be the right fit. If they don't have a requirement on that, I can definitely write it for you. And you work with your client to find out what is it's like the treatment plan. You're working with your client because this is your client's life that you're writing this for. You're going to help your clients build their own personal quote-unquote toolbox of coping skills. What is going to help them cope effectively? Many of our clients come with coping skills, but they're not effective. They may be alcoholism or, I smoke pot every once in a while and or I eat, whenever I'm stressed, things like that. Yeah, they're coping skills, but they're not effective and they actually cause more harm than good. So you want to help replace those slowly, not all at one time. You may be providing crisis intervention. You might be, you will be developing and implementing a treatment plan with every single client you work with. That is part of note keeping. And highly important, especially, again, if your notes get subpoenaed. You could actually get in trouble ethically with the state board for not keeping up with notes or keeping up with your treatment plans. So some additional tasks. Evaluate clients. You're going to look at this holistically. Spirituality in therapy has become a huge portion of therapy. A lot of research is being written about how important it is for spirituality in counseling. One of the things that we know as a Christian is that it's really hard to get through things without that faith in God, without, that knowledge that we're not alone in this. Now, if you're working with an atheist or an agnostic, that is their spiritual belief. So understand that if you are a Christian working with an atheist or agnostic, you want to make sure that you are being respectful for their spiritual beliefs, as well as showing that kindness and compassion for the difference of beliefs. Okay. We also want to make sure that we are looking at things that might be medically based. I was working with a client recently that we were talking about the need for them to get a full physical to see if their issues are medical or mental health. So there might be times where you refer your client to a doctor to get a full physical to see what's going on. And over 10 years, that has not been the first time I've done that. You're advocating for your clients. Advocating for your clients doesn't necessarily mean you always agree, but you're advocating for their self-care and their mental and physical well-being while they're struggling with what it is that they're coming for help with. You're modifying your treatment plan as needed. And you're evaluating your program and finding the things that need to be adjusted. So one of the things I do every day whenever I get finished with my day is I ask myself 3 questions. What did I do well? What did I do okay? And where did I seriously go wrong? And yes, I do ask myself those 3 questions in that exact way. What that does is it helps remind me that I'm not doing everything horribly bad, that I did have some good points. Because sometimes when we get to that 3rd question, even sometimes with the 2nd question, if you're a perfectionistic mindset, we start thinking, oh my gosh, everything was bad. I was a horrible therapist. Why am I in this profession? When in reality, you actually did a lot of good things. These are just a couple of things in the okay and the bad that you need to beef up on and improve on. And so that may be focusing your CEs on that, or working with your site supervisor, or working with a fellow therapist who's been in the field a lot longer than you and gaining knowledge. Sometimes for me, it's working with my interns, my LPCAs, because sometimes I'll go to them and I'll say, guys, I need y'all's advice on this, and allow them that opportunity to help form my mind around something that I'm struggling with. So this field is one of those that you want to have a good network system, because that's going to help you not only with referrals if you need to refer out, or if you need somebody to cover for you because you're going to be out, but also because when we have those tough days, we need that person to kind of bounce ideas off of and get some perspective, and then go back and work with that person, with our client. So I put on here, don't be the problem, be the problem solver. Guys, you're going to be tested on that one, not like a test. Don't freak out. But you're going to be tested on that on different things throughout this program, because part of this program is to split the best of the best from the ones that have no business doing this profession. Okay? So you need to know that on the outset. Again, we have a lot of gatekeeping processes for a reason. Okay? So you want to make sure that if or when a problem occurs in this program, you learn to be the problem solver, not be the problem. Don't add to. So, this works out whenever you've got a client who's yelling at you and chewing you out for doing something wrong. Be the problem solver in that. Remind yourself that you're the professional and be the problem solver. So keep that in mind through this entire program. Again, we meet with those involved. So we may have ROIs for family probation officers, police, courts, EAPs. EAPs are employee assistant programs. So we may have ROIs for these groups. And so we work with them to gain greater knowledge. So if I'm working with a minor, then I'm going to say to my minor, do you mind if I bring your parent in here and get their perspective on how you've been doing? And 9 times out of 10, I get a, sure, that's fine. And we get to learn a little bit more, and my client gets to learn a little bit more. Ultimately, my client is the minor, not the family, even though the family is paying for it. Again, ultimately, my client is the focus, even if we're working with these people outside. We have to take what they say, process it through with what we hear the client, and somewhere in the middle is what's actually happening. Because there's two sides to every coin. So make sure you're thinking through those pieces. Employee assistant programs don't typically ask for feedback, but there's a few of them that do. So again, if you're going to take insurance, you will probably also be working with the EAPs. You're going to discuss with the client their post-therapeutic plans. Now, the way I view this is I do an as-needed program. I don't want my clients to feel like they've been dropped. So what I let them know is, let's taper out. So we start out with weekly or bi-weekly sessions as we're able to do. Sometimes that's due to their finances. Sometimes it's due to their schedule or my schedule. So weekly to bi-weekly is what I like to start a client with. Then we slowly taper off to every few weeks to once a month. So if I started them off bi-weekly, I'm going to probably go to once a month. If I started them off weekly, I'm probably going to go with every 2 weeks and just kind of double from that. And then I let them know when we get to that point where we're not scheduling the next appointment, they are not terminated. They are moved to an as-needed basis. So that way, if something should happen, they can always give me a call back and we'll just start fresh. I have had some clients that I hear from every few years and they just touch base with me. Sometimes it's not even that they need to talk through something. It's just, I want to touch base. And for them, it's that safety net. And so we do that. I like that phrase a little bit more than terminate, because terminate feels like it's done, you can't come back. That's the way I interpret it. You may feel like I like the idea of terminate better than as needed, because I don't want them to become dependent. So there's two sides to every coin. You got to decide for you what's your best phrase to use. Okay? And I've already talked about collaboration. We don't work on an island of one. Even if you're in a sole practice, you want to collaborate. And you want to provide knowledge to the family. I had a student one time I was working with who told his parents, well, I'm doing this because my therapist told me I needed to do this. And they thankfully called me and they said, hey, did you tell my child to do such and such? And I said, no. I had told your child this is what I want them to work on. And the parents were like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. And it was a miscommunication between me and the client. So what I learned is that whenever I walk out with a client, especially a minor, sitting down with the family and saying, okay, these are our goals for the client to work on between now and the next session. Now, I put on here monitor medications. We are not medical professionals, okay? So we have to understand where our limit is on this. What we want to do when we're monitoring medications is when we see a client suffering from a side effect, or we see the client's medications are not being as effective as they should, we want to request that client goes back to their PCP or psychologist, whoever prescribed the medication for them. You will plan, organize, and lead appropriate programs. You will attend continuing education classes. This is state required. Texas requires 24 hours. 3 hours are ethics and 3 hours are human trafficking. The rest of the 24 are up to you. I recommend doubling that. And it's every 2 years because your license lasts 2 years. And so I recommend doubling that so that way whenever I turn in, if for some reason the state decides to audit my records, they can look at it and be like, oh, okay, yeah, she got her ethics in, she got her human trafficking in, she got her supervision hours in there. Yes, if you become a supervisor, there's also, I believe it's 6 hours of supervision. So we have to meet our state requirements. If you're not in Texas, you want to research your state and find out what their CEs are required. And again, I just say double it because then that gets you a safety net in case they come in and they say, nope, this ain't going to work. We attend CE classes. These are the two I recommend, NetCE and CE for Less. There's also PESI, P-E-S-I. The reason I recommend these two is because they are viewed as acceptable to the National Board Certified Counselors, NBCC. They are also approved by the state of Texas. And again, you want to check your state to make sure that they're approved, but they should be. The other thing I like about them is that you pay a yearly fee and you can take as many courses as you want for that yearly fee. I believe NetCE is like $84 a year and CE for Less is $79. I actually pay a yearly fee on both of them, and I have courses that are stacked up, and so whenever I have free time, I go through and I take courses, and that's how I get a lot of my CEs. And that's on those years that I don't have a topic like EMDR that I want to study. Refer when necessary, not because you don't enjoy working with the issue. Have an updated list of referrals and references and resources. And guys, you're going to find this whenever you're able to supervise. We are the gatekeepers. Be very kind to your site supervisors. They can make it or break it for you. That is in graduate school and postgraduate. So you need to understand your supervisors when you get to clinician classes and you get to postgraduate hours, your supervisors can make or break you. That means you want to interview your supervisor and make sure that they are the right fit for you. Okay, so the final set of tasks that are within our counseling field is adequately provide addiction counseling programs and counseling. So if addictions is not part of your scope and sequence of what you want to specialize in, it's kind of like anxiety and depression. You have to understand that these three things, anxiety, depression, and addictions, tend to run within all areas of counseling. A lot of our clients use addictive type behaviors as their coping mechanism. In addition, addictions are not always drug and alcohol. Usually addictions are going to be something It could be shopping. It could be sexual. It could be relationships. So we have to keep that in mind, that when we're looking at addiction counseling, it's not strictly drugs and alcohol. And then finally, coordinate and direct employee workshops, courses, trainings, participate in conferences as a speaker, publicize articles for peer-reviewed journals, things of that nature. So as you can see, the task within our field is incredibly in-depth and all-encompassing, for a lack of a better phrase.